Welcome to Florida, homies. Boggs, welcome to Florida as well. We're going to do a little something that I love. Can you get your butt out of the video? We're going to do a little something that I absolutely love, dude, and that's get out the thick rope, the no stretch rope. And that's flipping, dude. We've had some colder weather and we're on a warming trend. And what happens down here in Florida is a lot of times these fish, pre-spawn up north is these fish getting deep, right? And they're moving in, you catch them on an A-rig, you catch them dangling a minnow, they're moving up into the medium like depth flats with a chatterbait and a trap. Well, down in Florida, we ain't got no deep water. There's some lakes that have it, but most of these lakes are pretty flat and pretty featureless. So in order for these fish to do their pre-spawn thing, what they actually do is they use super heavy vegetation to stage up before they spawn. And my dog's butt is all in this video. He's gonna be pretty fired up if we actually catch one. What we're gonna do is take this 1.5 tungsten and a 175 tungsten and some heavy line, and we're gonna look for the thickest, nastiest stuff that we can find, and we're gonna drop our cricket in it and see what happens. Well, that's a nice way to start it off. Oh, we barely freaking kept her freaking peg, dude. Look how fat that is. That's so cool. That's so freaking cool. How about that, boys? It's a freaking tank. Wow, that was sloppy. Bro, that fish freaking came out of nowhere and literally just freaking smoked it. Yeah, she's gonna go back. Nice little 4.5, 5 pounder, but it seems like we're just fishing the ditch, and every little like corner that sticks out, it's just like regular fishing. Any little point or anything that sticks out a little bit over that deeper water, they're just suspended right there under that stuff. I love flipping, and with all the forward-facing stuff you have to do to stay competitive, tournaments-wise, and dude, even on YouTube, like I have to kind of like learn this stuff, figure it out, and be halfway proficient at it so that I can present something that's like competitive with the other people that are making content around. And it's nice to kind of turn back and look at some of the basics. And one of the things I absolutely love to do is flip, and especially flipping mats. And you saw, we caught some great big ones, and it was exactly what you're supposed to be doing during that pre-spawn as those fish move up. And I think something that kind of gets neglected sometimes is how you can do that technique where you can flip mats. Maybe they don't look like Florida, massive like penny wart, hyacinth mats, things along those lines, but you can flip this matted and sort of like canopied cover like just about anywhere. Obviously there's gonna be exceptions, but one of the biggest things that surprised me when I moved to North Alabama is fishing Smith Lake. A great example. Smith Lake is a highland impoundment, super deep, ultra freaking clear, dude, and it's a spotted bass lake with herring. And the water came up one year and flooded everything. There's logs in the river, in the main creek channel. There's crap blowing around like sawdust, gunk everywhere. And what ended up happening is in a lot of these little kind of like corners here, we're kind of like wedged into a little pocket. In a lot of the little pockets in that, a lot of this cover, there's no grass in the lake, but a lot of this cover got kind of wedged and stuck. And then all this floaty sawdust crap floated in,
And dude, we were able to take, you know, and it's a modified rig. Normally when I'm doing this mat stuff down here in Florida, I'm running basically just like a 1.5. It's a 1.5 ounce tungsten. I think that's a Hogtech. I got a 4-aught, that's a Strike King Hack Attack hook. In this case, I got a Burnicron, but we're gonna talk about that in a sec. But I went down to like a 1 ounce and went and flipped those sawdust mats and actually caught both largemouth and spotted bass. Colder water too, like 40s and actually upper 40s. I think it was 48 to 53 degrees. And the same thing actually happened on the Tennessee River too. You know, you get these floods, all this junk kind of rolls in and gets stuck, and it was literally junk. We did this on Wilson Lake, dude. All this junk got stuck and we actually flipped mats. So there's a lot more options to doing this matted kind of flipping during the pre-spawn than just vegetation. It's a super sort of dimensional technique, but there's a couple things that you need to kind of take into account if you want to try it. One thing is setup, dude. It's really important you have the right rod. I like, this is a 7-foot, 11-inch heavy action Halo TI. That and a 7.6 heavy action XD3 are kind of my go-tos for this. I'm usually never going below, say, like a 3/4 or 1 ounce weight, and that's why you need those stouter rods. But the big trick here is a heavy action, not an extra heavy. A lot of guys make that mistake. That's one of the huge mistakes. They overpower the rod. When those fish get pegged in that, you cannot pull them out. You go and get them. And you also need that tip. These fish kind of, they're under that mat and under that canopy cover for a reason, right? They're kind of neutral. They're not in the best of moods. So you need to be able to kind of present that bait and feel some of those light bites and things along those lines. What speaks to that too, let me rip this burner craw off, is the snell. So the snell is one of the classic flipping deals. Basically, when you pull on that deal, the hook kicks up just like that, and that's why you use a straight shank. It's a very simple knot. I actually have an old video you guys can go back to. It's one of the OG freaking Mikey Balls videos. My buddy Donnie Bass taught me how to tie that, and what you want is for that hook to kick up so that even though you're using braid, and I'd highly recommend you use braid in almost all of these situations, even though you're using that braid, you're not really hitting the fish that hard. You're using that tip of that rod, you know, 7-11 heavy, it's got some tip on it, 7.6 heavy, got some tip. Using that tip, that no stretch braid, and then that hook as a complete system to really kind of lock those fish down. The other thing too that you want to take into account is what kind of braid and what kind of reel you're using. A lot of times in this vegetation, I like to use something that's extra quiet. And I've talked to you guys about this before. I used Iowa Samurai braid. It's kind of a fusion style braid. This is 80 pound. I know it sounds heavy, but the 65 is a little too thin for my liking. But what you need to take into effect is what kind of cover are you kind of like grinding that line against? In my situation, it's vegetation, so I can use that modified kind of quieter line, I guess, and I don't have to worry about hard objects nicking that line and breaking it off. That's the biggest problem with some of those fusion lines like the Iowa Samurai braid. If you're fishing like those sawdust mats that I talked about, where there's a bunch of wood, a bunch of logs around, you're gonna wanna go up to either like a standard Power Pro. Sunline makes, I think, like an FX flipping line, very rigid, very strong. The other thing that you have to take into account, and somebody, I don't even know what his name is, some dude on YouTube, one of the tournament guys, like posted something, and he was kind of like not seeing the value of the BB Cricket. And maybe, you know, odds are, I don't think he's a Florida guy. I think he came down and tried it in Florida. Somebody told me about it. I don't know who he is, but he tried to fish it, and maybe he doesn't know how to use it correctly. I don't know, but the BB Cricket is the prime example of the best pre-spawn flipping bait ever. Like, we use it during cold fronts down here in Florida, but it doubles more so as kind of a very non-invasive, very simple, non-kicking appendage bait. The other aspect that I really like about that BB Cricket is the compactness. It allows me to use a lighter weight during this pre-spawn period to get through some of these mats, whether they're sawdust mats, grass mats, or whatever. Because it is so compact, it really slips through whatever kind of matted or cover vegetation that you're like trying to get through, and it allows you to kind of downsize the weight. Oftentimes, normally I'll like go to a 1.5 to punch. Oftentimes when I use that BB Cricket, I can go down to a 1 1/4, or I can go down to a 1 ounce because it is so compact to slip through. And there's a lot of baits like that. The biggest key though is to think about appendages and action. So the key with this BB Cricket is the straight kind of do nothing appendages. And there's a lot of baits like that. The Reaction Innovations Beaver is a great example. I got a bunch over here that I really like. I do this mod with a culprit and credit craw. They actually sell a punch craw, but I kind of like doing the mod better. It kind of comes out better. So basically I'll rip off those little dangly legs, and you have a bunch of straight appendages, where the key being is they do not kick. You have a compact sort of bait and appendages that do not kick. And that's my mainstay for when it comes to pre-spawn. And I've done it on Guntersville too, even in some of those shallow like primrose mats when some of that grass blows in. And that's what really kind of overall surprises me. There's general kind of concepts that although it's Florida, we're catching giants, you can apply them wherever. Like I took that mat punching up to Wilson, up to the Tennessee River, up to Smith Lake, up to Guntersville, and it still works, but those same principles apply. Trying to use the lightest weight possible, using a compact, non-kicking appendage bait, whatever you prefer, but compact, try to keep it small, and then adjusting your line accordingly to the cover that's around you. It's a killer technique, and I love it, dude. There's nothing that sings to me more than when that braid loads up and it goes, and you're like, oh my God, it's gonna be a good day, right? I love flipping. It's close quarters kind of combat, and oftentimes it allows you, especially with all these guys, and I'm one of them, but a lot of guys are so focused on forward facing that they're forgetting about all the pre-spawn fish that creep up and sit ultra shallow, waiting for that right time to spawn, versus dangling out in the creek channels, floating around, suspended, chasing bait and things along those lines. So I think there's an opportunity for those of us who want to push up shallow and use some of these more traditional techniques. We just need to kind of, you know, be creative about them and sort of apply things that maybe aren't always the first thing that you think of in your neighborhood. And that's kind of how I think of flipping. Florida, yeah, of course we're gonna flip. When I get to Alabama, flipping kind of, you know, in the spring, sneaky little kind of chop mats and junk mats, kind of sneaky, right? So you kind of reimagine things. But I just want to do a little thing on flipping, dude, because I absolutely love it, and it's the right time of year, especially if you're a little north of Florida, to get into some of that stuff and start dabbling and get your setups going. I've played around with a new reel. I know how much I absolutely love the Curados, but this will be the last thing I leave you with. I'm playing with a Revo. I think this is the SXSS. It's actually a reel specifically made for flipping. It only has like, I don't know, like 50 yards of line on it or something when it comes to braid. The spool is gigantic, so you can't put a bunch of line on it. It's kind of badass. I really like it. It's very smooth, and one of the things that I've always loved about the Curados is their stoutness, right? You engage it, and it's like a freight train bulldozer, dude. You're like, click, and it's like, yeah, I'm ready. Just pull on me as hard as you want. And I really get that feel for it. I don't know how long it'll last. I just got it. I've been flipping with it, as you saw in the video. We caught like a 6+, we caught another like 5, almost 6, and a bunch of rats to go along with them. I don't know how long it'll last. That's always the challenge when it comes to flipping reels, is they start off great, and then 8-10 months down the road, they make all these crazy sounds, and then the drag gives out, or like the instant anti-reverse gives out. Thus far though, pretty slick, dude. And it just feels super stout. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you get the opportunity, go flip a little during the pre-spawn. You know, like it's awesome. There's giants up there. It's the last step before they get to the beds and do their thing, and then you can look at them again. But pretty cool. I'll put links to some of my favorite flipping baits at Monster Bass and Tackle Warehouse, as well as my punching setup. If you guys got any questions or anything to add, kind of like quirky little flipping bites that you figured out on your lake, your pond, whatever, that sort of like fall outside the normal circumstances, drop them down in the comments. I'd love to hear them. We will see you next time out on the water, hanging out with Bogdo, talking about fishing.